Call the meeting to LaPorte County Plan Commission on Tuesday, June 23rd to order. Please rise for Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Parker, will you lead us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. If you have any cell phones or electronic devices, please turn them on mute or vibrate, unless you're emergency services. And roll call, please.
Anthony Hendricks.
Here.
Rita Beatty Kelly.
Here.
Rich Merzinski.
Here.
Harold Parker.
Here.
Earl Cunningham.
Here.
Glenn Minnick.
Here.
Sean Quinn.
Here.
John Carr.
Thank you. We have a quorum. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as submitted?
I make a motion to approve the agenda as submitted.
Second the motion.
Are there any changes, additions, deletions, corrections? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion approved. Is there approval of the minutes from the May 26, 2020 meeting as presented?
So moved.
Second.
So motion is second. Any changes, additions, deletions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion approved. Petition number 1, petitioner Donald H. and Catherine Bodie, represented by Andrew Volz of House and House. Petition the Plan Commission to vacate the undeveloped platted roadway adjacent to the property known as 115 Maple Drive. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good evening. My name is Andrew Volz. I'm an attorney with House and House here in LaPorte, representing petitioners Donald H. Booty and Catherine S. Booty with regards to the petition to vacate the plotted but undeveloped roadway and/or alleyway located adjacent to and between their property. This can be a truncated presentation because the Plan Commission had already heard this back in January 28th of 2020. It was kicked to the commissioners where no action was taken, so we're basically just going through the motions again. And the reason for that was the lack of a unanimous vote based upon lack of attendance by members of the Plan Commission. Now, I don't know if we're in the same position tonight with that.
Well, we should have enough members, because last meeting we only had a quorum. We have more than a quorum this time. So, and the rule is if we only have a quorum, it has to still, it has to be unanimous vote with the reduced number of members. So, I think we're okay tonight.
Okay.
And his notifications.
Pardon?
Notification is okay. Thank you.
Yeah, let's make a record. We check publication and notices, and they're adequate.
Thank you.
And then just to be clear, this now is reverting back to what the original petition was back in January that was amended on the record to remove from the petition the 30-foot by 300-foot strip stretching from Maple Drive to the lake, and just was simply limited to that 70-foot by 30-foot sliver adjacent to his house and the property that appears to be located in the lake. As you will note on the map that I provided for you, now we are re-amending the petition to include the entirety of what I'm going to refer to as the upside down 7, which is the remainder of what was formerly known as Beach Drive in the plat that I've provided for you as well. And you will note that the adjacent landowners to the south of petitioners today, the Slaters, they had previously successfully filed a petition to vacate the area of Beach Drive that ran adjacent to and between their properties. So I believe the record is clear here that there is precedent for this to take place. And to refresh the Commission's recollection about what happened at the last meeting that was widely attended, we had a number of remonstrators present. And I will go on the record as stating that my clients, the Booties, and the previous remonstrators have come to an agreement with regards to a different location for where that pier is that would wind up being on property that was deeded to them, whether it was individually or to an entity, but to allow them the lake access that they desired in a manner that is legal and above board, and it doesn't have any questions with regards to the DNR. Because I think if we open up this can of worms here, the dock placement right now, or the pier placement right now, is inappropriate, and it could certainly be removed by DNR if my clients were to choose to go in that direction. Now, again, we've reached an agreement with the remonstrators, as represented by Mr. Otis here, who I'm certain will be speaking up here when I'm done. But the agreement maintains their lake access with fee simple ownership as opposed to an easement. And it's a workaround with regards to DNR regulations, because an easement requires a certain amount of frontage, but deeded fee simple ownership does not require that amount of frontage in order to put a dock or a pier into a body of water. So again, we are requesting that the entirety of the remainder of Beach Drive, and again, I'm going to reference it as the upside down 7, running from Maple Drive east southeast to the shoreline, and then south southwest adjacent to and in between Mr. and Mrs. Booty's properties be vacated, and allow them to take fee simple ownership of that. And I would welcome any questions if there are any.
For the record, last time it came, my concern was the deed to the Booties, to the beach part that was adjacent to the lake and between them and the road. Typically, in my profession, I see some deeds that are nefarious at best. But we did a real estate office in LaPorte County, and I did background research, and they do have what I consider a clear warranty title to that beach. It was not a quitclaim. It was clear warranty deed from the original owner who developed Tree Haven. So that was my concern, and I have that concern no more. Any questions from the board?
And Mr. Hendricks, if I do remember correctly, I believe you voted against, so I do appreciate that clarification. Thank you.
Any questions from the board?
I do have a question, without going back through those minutes of January. I think had Tony voted in favor, it would have passed that evening.
That is correct. From my understanding, Mr. Cunningham, you are correct.
That would have been a 5 vote for just the piece, not the L.
Correct.
Yes.
And I do know the board's concern, as was well indicated by the remonstrators that were present, were that they were going to be cut off from any lake access that they may or may not have believed that they were entitled to based upon the purchase of their inland properties. But again, this is not, and I'm doing a lot of these right now. I've got a couple going on in Fish Lake right now where these channels, and they exist on the island in several places, are specifically detailed in the plat as public use, whereas the inland owners then have access. This is a different situation here because we're talking about a plotted but undeveloped roadway in the name of Beach Drive. And again, the precedent has already been set based upon the Slater's petition that was heard late last year for Beach Drive to be vacated.
Any other questions from the board?
I don't know if this is pertinent or not, but I mean, in the original petition, when we were talking about doing this, I know the petitioners against wanted access to the lake. I guess my question is, are the Booties giving access to a specific group?
I think that could be further clarified by Mr. Otis in his representation of these inland owners, but again, these are the only individuals that used this or had access to what currently exists as the status quo. Nobody else did. And they've done it for years, but there is no legal precedent for them to establish a prescriptive easement or anything else like that, or an adverse possession claim, because this is property that is still considered to be owned by the government. So those claims fail as a matter of law. And if this doesn't go through, it's not going to wind up well for those inland landowners. They're going to lose their lake access.
Yeah, and that's my basic question is the new piece of land going to be given to the inland?
It is. It will be deeded to whatever,
in entirety.
Either to them individually, and we still haven't worked this out yet, as to if it's a deed from the Booties to the 4 remonstrators specifically that were present at the last meeting, or if they're going to turn it into some kind of an LLC or other corporation or something like that, that would then allow unfettered access based on that 10-foot strip to be given to these inland residents that they could use it in perpetuity.
We call up Attorney Otis.
So who's paying taxes on this?
I'm sorry, Mr. Parker.
When you start doing this, who's the owner? Who's paying the taxes?
The owner of what?
what you're trying to do.
If the vacation is successful, if the Plan Commission does recommend to the commissioners that this vacation go forward, the Booties would be paying taxes on the 300 by 30 strip and the 30 by 70 strip. And then the 10-foot strip, which we haven't determined the length yet because we still have to have a survey, those taxes would be paid by whomever or whatever entity that property is deeded to.
Mr. Otis may explain.
Oh, that's clear as mud, isn't it?
Maybe Mr. Otis can
I mean,
share.
how much more difficult, you haven't proposed any real answers.
What, I guess,
but
I'm-
who's paying taxes?
No,
And
they're-
who's got the right to the land?
Okay.
So these people are actually buying the land in this LLC.
no,
I think I can clarify this a little bit more. So, the inland landowners on the island, as I understand it, a lot of them had been told previous by their realtors, by history, that they have certain easements to the lake. And those easements are not being, excuse me, those easements are not being taxed to really anybody, and so this 10-foot strip would not be either, but that's consistent with the rest of them.
well, and let me clarify that. And this is where it gets muddy, to go with what you said, that they kept referring to it as an easement. It never was an easement. It is not an easement. It's a plotted but undeveloped roadway.
Correct.
And so the problem is that when they were researching the law with this, with DNRs, DNR requires certain square footage with easements to provide for lake access. If you have individual ownership, the amount of property that you have is much, much less, which is why we got down to the 10-foot. And again, it's not, they never had an easement. And if they were told as such, well, they were told wrong. I'm not.
Yeah, we're all looking at Rita. But I want to add, though, Glenn, the public doesn't have unfettered access, number one. Number two, the only people that have an opportunity or the right to object would be the adjacent property owners, and that's it. So whatever the realtors told some of these other folks further inland, they don't have standing to object in this.
I'm not talking about this easement particular. There are other right-of-ways to the lake in other spots, and all I'm saying is, I'm questioning whether this new one would be consistent with those or not.
And again, I want to clarify, we got to be very specific with the language we're using here. They're not easements. They're designated on the plat as public use, and that is not what Beach Drive was. If it's designated as public use, which I've encountered at Fish Lake, that's an entirely different monster than what this is here. And granted, at Fish Lake, they wound up vacating the entirety of the 16-foot strip all the way around the lake anyways, but that's a different monster here, and it's not an easement, it's a plotted but undeveloped roadway. That's it.
And this new configuration will not be the same as the other arrangements.
Right.
Yeah.
Good evening. Uncovering, this is not my bailiwick, typically uncovering for Mr. Novak. His wife is expecting a baby any day. I didn't want to be around.
Your mic, he's just too tall for it.
Yeah, there we go. Large group of people. So, turn it up. There we go.
Thank you.
So I represent the remonstrators, which would be Joseph and Megan Johnkind, Brian and Eric O'Malley, Jeremiah and Norma Ash, and Todd Reed. So they'd be considered the four inland landowners adjacent to this right-of-way. And they did previously object to vacating this right-of-way, but based off of and I would re-raise the objections that they made to the extent we can't reach an agreement. But I think we have an agreement at this point, and I maybe can help clarify on the taxes. This area that would be vacated would become Mr. Booty's property, and that would be taxable. It's not being taxed right now, I would assume, because it's
Right.
county property. So, and then my clients, the remonstrators, would receive in fee simple, as Andrew pointed out, about approximately 10 feet on the north edge of Mr. Booty's property currently. The benefit to him is our client's docks will move further away from his house. So Andrew and I we got to work out the language of those deeds, have to get a survey done, but that is the plan right now, that they would withdraw their objections with the understanding that if this is vacated, they will get that 10-foot strip along with the right to install their dock so that they can have the 4 boats there. So they would own 10 feet on the north end that would be taxed as well. So there would no longer be any...
How long is that? 10 feet by what?
300 something.
It's going to be less than 300 because it goes in a little bit, but it's I would guess 200 to 250.
So
And that land is currently being taxed right now.
So a question for Anne Marie or our attorney is, does that then negate item A of our agenda?
Is that Mr. John Kine's petition?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what we would ask is that you just table that tonight. It would be likely, if we reach a positive result, that would become moot.
Well, I want to make sure our record is clear.
Yep.
Mr. John Kine filed this petition, and we put it on the agenda for matters of convenience, and so there would not be confusion. His petition's not technically properly before the Plan Commission, because the Plan Commission does not have the jurisdiction to grant his requests, okay? But I didn't want to have one petition in front of the commissioners, one petition here, so we put them both on the agenda so that both matters can pass simultaneously from the commission to the commissioners, okay?
And that brings up another point. If this board so chooses and agrees to the vacation, can the motion be that pending the agreement with the 10 feet has to happen? Is that legal for us to do? Kind of out of our jurisdiction there.
Right, I mean, if we approve this vacation, I mean,
Yeah, they could say no.
they could not reach an agreement, and too bad for the inland folks.
Yeah.
Well, that's true. That's
Mr.
true.
Quinn, I'll go ahead and speak to that. We have an agreement. What this is contingent upon is the commissioners passing the ordinance that would be presented. It has nothing to do with our respective parties. We have the agreement. But if the commissioners fail to approve the Plan Commission's recommendation, then the whole thing falls apart.
Yeah, the chicken or the egg here, and we don't.
Yeah, and that's kind of the difficulty. I think there's some history between our clients, is that maybe not trust is the right word, but you're exactly right. We get the agreement done first, and then Mr. Bodie's saying, well, then my property's not vacated. We want to make sure both are done. The plan would be to have all of the agreements done and signed, and then closed on it after the commissioners, I guess, approve the vacation.
Yeah, I'm going to cut in. The code allows for the Plan Commission to make reasonable conditions upon the approval. So you can include that contingency if you so wish.
Thank you. That's awesome.
Mr. Otis, would this be an accurate assessment that the 10 feet that your 4 clients are going to pay taxes on are already being paid taxes on by Mr. Booty?
Correct.
So the only increase in property taxes from the county standpoint would be the upside down
What
7.
would be vacated, correct.
So we're not losing any tax money. We're actually going to increase tax money.
And I would say so because there's no way that they could own that property subject to a homestead exemption or anything like that. They're going to pay the full tax rate.
Correct. That was my point. And in reality, the pure moving away from his home actually gives them more unfettered access, because common sense is they're not going to be out there screaming and yelling on the pier as close to their home as they would rather have it farther away. Both parties are going to be significantly improved if this movement takes place. Thank you.
Who are the homeowners just to the north of the Booty's property?
Sharon Stein.
Well, this would put the dock,
No, the dock would run south, so it wouldn't, we would not go onto their riparian rights at all. That's a discussion that Mr. Bolts.
Yeah, I guess I can
yeah, I'm not
shed some
saying it
light on
would,
it.
I'm not saying it would, but it would certainly move the dock much closer to their
right.
property.
Yeah, certainly, but the discussions that we've had is an alteration of the current configuration of what the mooring location is. So you've got this pier that juts out into the lake, and then there are arms that come out for these boats. And what Mr. Otis had provided me with was some photographic evidence of what they do down in Culver, where they have these angled 45-degree angle docks coming off of the pier that then significantly reduce any impact that they have on any adjacent landowners' riparian rights. as opposed to it going out like a tree. Well, I mean, it's still going out like a tree, but it's not, branches aren't going like this, they're going like this. Yes, correct. Thank you, Mr. Cunningham.
And the design would be, because they don't have as much lake frontage, you're exactly right. We plan not to have boats coming even on, like, accessing the pier from their side. So we're trying to be cognizant of all the neighbors. But there are other, I think Mr. Minnick had indicated, other parts of the lake where inland owners have this kind of narrow access to the lake. So I've become more familiar with docks in the last week and a half than I have my entire life.
This is a question for Doug. Would the Steins, because they are not directly adjacent to the property that has been petitioned for vacation, would they be a valid remonstrator?
I don't think so, because they're not the adjacent property owner to the vacation itself.
The truth of the matter is, Mr. Booty could go out and put the pier exactly where Mr. Otis's clients want to put it, right now. He has the right to do that. So you're not adversely...
In this room have that right.
You're not adversely affecting... No, well, right now, Mr. Booty owns where you're going to move the pier to.
Right.
He could put the pier there today, and the Steins have no objection. So that's a moot point. It's just that 4 other people are going to use that pier rather than him.
And Mr. Quinn, just to clarify too, the Steins did receive notice of this hearing as an adjacent
Excuse
landowner.
me. I spoke to Mrs. Stein last week, and she did not express any concern.
Thank you.
We'll open the floor for any other remonstrators for or against the petition. I don't see many people, but are there any other remonstrators for or against the petition? Hearing none, what's the board's pleasure?
I would make a motion that we give a favorable recommendation to the commissioners.
Second.
There's a favorable recommendation to the commissioners and a second. Any discussion on the motion?
Are we gonna put that thing in that the deal has to go through to make it work?
Is there any contingency to the motion?
I think that would be presented to the commissioners at the time, won't it?
The commissioners will hear the same thing we just heard. Yes, they will.
Okay, we're good then.
Okay, there's a motion for grant favorable approval for the vacation of the adjacent platted unimproved right-of-way. Any other questions, discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Thank you. So that removes item A, Joseph John Kine, Jeremiah Ash, Todd Reed, for the 30 by 300 foot lake access.
Mr. President, I would like to thank the 2 attorneys that are here this evening for getting this worked out over the last 6 months.
Yes, thank you for doing that in trying times. Item number 2, solar ordinance, which is in front of us as a change to the joint zoning ordinance.
But keep in mind, I sent everybody a copy of the ordinance. I do not intend to introduce it for passage tonight, but I sent it out so there could be a discussion, any adds or deletions. Mitch had some good suggestions which we incorporated, and I wanted the commission to take a look, since this is a novel and it's a new thing, to see if there were any questions or suggestions. And then next month, or next plan commission meeting, because we have plenty of time, next plan commission meeting, we can introduce it for passage and recommendation to the commissioners.
For a note, in my professional world, we have seen a lot of these lately, and from what I understand is, I'm trying to think what they call it, net metering, right? So net metering, I believe, in the state of Indiana, which would be your power companies, NIPSCO, South County, there, maybe Michigan knows this too. After July, I believe this year, you no longer have to accept power from people's solar panels. So that is going to stymie a lot of we've seen a lot of solar panels in the last 6 months. They're just more than I've ever seen, because they're all trying to beat the deadline for the net metering and being grandfathered in. So if there's no net metering, what that means, I understand it means that if you create more power in your solar panels than you use in your home for whatever period that is, NIPSCO does not, or power company does not have to pay you anymore. So you either have to store it on site in a battery, or you give it to them for free. So we're seeing that grandfather clause go away in July, I believe, next month. So there's going to be I believe there's going to be very few people even jump on board anymore. But we do need to look at this because there was just a glut of them in the last 6 months. Everyone was trying to beat this date for net metering.
Yeah, and part of what prompted this discussion also, there was talk of a possible solar, was it in KFP, Nick?
Yeah, I did see one.
Yeah, there's talk of a possible solar farm in KIP, I think, but it takes 2 or 3 years, didn't you say?
Yeah, so there was a couple different inquiries, large solar farms, southeast portion of LaPorte County. But yeah, you have to go on the federal end. It takes roughly 2 or 3 years to get their blessing, basically certifications that allows them to build. So even if they want to, and that was kind of the precipitate, that's what started this effort, I guess, was, hey, they came in, they said, what do you have on your books? As far as I said, well, that was an oversight. And when you have a 300-page book, usually there's not too many oversights, but, we got wind towers, but solar panels was just an oversight. And it is something we should include. We should have development standards for them, for both large and small users. And I think that's something we should include. But that big solar farm, they still have, even if they are going to come, it's still 2 or 3 years out. So it's not a huge rush. But as I stated in my email, Michigan City is well on board with this as well. And I had discussions with LaPorte, and they all want to do something. And it's part of the joint zoning ordinance, so all 3 should be represented. Now, Michigan City, their planner isn't even going to bring it to their plan commission until the end of July. So we're well ahead of the game here by introducing it to you. And I think how we foresee it is we need to coordinate a little bit more. But I think when we get to a point where we're all happy with it, I think we need to then share it with the cities and come up with one complete document. And after speaking with the planners, that's kind of what we'd envision. I'm sure the attorneys feel the same way.
Just like we did with the joint zoning ordinance. I mean, the zoning attorney for the city of LaPorte at the time, and Michigan City, and we went through the entire book, and then we did revisions that we agreed to do. So we're going to do the same thing here. And Westville will just jump in here too, I'm sure.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
Well, I'm their zoning attorney, so guess what?
Okay.
I'm glad you came up here because a few of my quick thoughts were the height above buildings that people are putting them on their roofs. I'm sure you looked at that.
Right.
I like that people could potentially be putting signs on these panels, kind of getting around our billboard ordinance. And people putting them in their front yards, probably not. We can't stop that right now, but we probably need to not let that happen.
Yeah.
We don't need people with solar panels in front yards and residential subdivisions.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of stuff is really good, and the removal.
Yep.
Yes.
Exactly.
There's a huge
decommission
discussions going on about windmills and wind turbine blades. What do you do with those? They're piling them out west.
Right.
What do you do with them?
And we've got that in our ordinance now for wind towers.
You need
You got to decommission.
insurance policy out to remove the stuff when they get done.
Yeah, I don't know the best way. I think, Doug, as far as the decommission, he's referring to decommission
And you
plan.
need some teeth.
Some kind of deal where you can grab the owner, like in the last position it says, assess to the owner a cost, attorney fees and everything. Is the owner of the solar field or the property owner?
The property owner.
Because I understand a lot of these contracts, they end out their solar panel contracts with that they will come and remove them. Now that doesn't guarantee that the company's in place anymore and they actually do it.
Well, and the way it's written, it's if the owner or operator. Okay, so they're both included in this ordinance. Realistically, if I've got to go after them, I'm going to name both of them.
It's a hazardous waste when you have to tear a solar part of it. It's not cheap. So there's been some stuff in the state where they're making them put money up for just abandonment. Because 20 years are due shot, and it's expensive.
Right.
It's expensive.
Any other discussion on anyone's quick read of?
One thing that I'm just double checking is, what is our height for an accessory building? Isn't that 18 feet? Well, I saw something in here like 20 feet. Is it 22? It seems to me that somebody suggested that height should be lower than that, and can't they come and get a variance? I mean, there's some situations where they're in such an isolated area, you might say, go ahead and go 20 feet or 24 feet, but we don't.
I talked to my electrical inspector, and he has to inspect those.
Okay.
And he said there's different components and different... He had a reason for that electrically, the different components that could go on there. And also, if it's in a floodplain, it would have the height. And that's what was in the original one in St. Joe County.
The floodplain, I understand that. That seems to me like that's just a variance. They should come in and say, well, we're in the floodplain, you should go 24 feet, 26 feet.
Well, the original one we were given had 22 feet, and the inspector thought that was fine. But
122 feet in a subdivision, which is as high as an accessory building.
I think that refers to what large,
Up 2 feet higher.
large, there's large and small scale panels. I think that's referring to a larger, it wouldn't be in a that couldn't be in a subdivision. Yeah, that ordinance, that was a sample ordinance. Again, it was by the manufacturing industry for cell towers, and my understanding is they passed it to St. Joe County, and St. Joe County maybe finagled it a little bit, and they adopted it. So there were some things like they had, I believe they allowed panels on facades of buildings. So there was a bunch of weird things in there but overall I think it'll work. Just a couple revisions.
I'm not worried, but if you get a 400-acre field and it's abandoned and it's hazardous waste, you're talking 100 plus grand to demolish and get rid of it.
Well,
As a hazardous waste.
And they have them. They have some 300 and 400 acre ones down south. This has been coming for 2 or 3 years. Farm Bureau's got some history on this stuff. I'm gonna send this down, see if they got any ideas, but
Well, I don't know if they offer a bond. If the insurance companies offer a bond, we could require a bond if the one exists. Yeah, I'm concerned about management of that. We're talking about the county turnover.
Doug knows from personal experience because we bond roads, and there's a drawer that's what, 20 years old. Some of those bonds still sitting there. Roads that have been done,
Yeah, yeah.
and Diane's been going through them.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible, and if the commission wants to put forth a bond requirement, we could, but sometimes administration of bonds in this county,
that's true.
less than streamlined.
Diane's going through them, and she has been for 2 years.
Yeah.
Is there any other legal way to do it?
No, I think a bond's pretty much the only way to do it.
Handcuffed by our own stuff.
Well, would this would potentially give the county the right to put a lien on their property, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, I can the plan commission. Like when I sue in the name of the plan commission. The plan commission can go after both the operator and the property owner, and it will serve as a lien on the property. But I would rather go through the condemnation statutes, because the trick there is, if I get a judgment on a condemnation, I can get it on the tax bill as a special assessment. It gives the county another way to collect. If we do it on bond, I got to pursue the bond, and then we lose a couple different avenues for seeking recourse.
We're there around, and that's usually your stopping point when you say, who's going to pay for getting rid of this stuff? So I have been in negotiations with a couple of them.
Sounds like you just volunteered to get some more information.
Well, I will. I'll send it to people who know what they're doing. I haven't studied it.
Ever worked it out with John?
No.
No comment?
What do you think they spent to get rid of that stuff? Yeah. Are still spending.
Any other discussion?
One other comment. I thank the two attorneys. I would also like to thank our president, Mr. Hendricks, because shortly after our last meeting, with all the research he did, helped clarify this situation. I appreciate the fact that he did it and that the county had the records that were necessary.
A little note, thank Mr. Commissioner Cunningham. Little ode to Barb Dean. She scanned all the records in that vault, and I got to sit at my desk and do that digitally. And the county gets to do that. So thanks to Barb Dean and her passing, that she did an amazing job. Those records are digital and available to the professionals in LaPorte County. Any other discussion?
So not good to farmers, just professional.
Real estate agents,
Actually, the public.
title companies. Oh, I'm sure we could get you some access. Any other discussion? Any old business? Seeing none. Any new business? Is there a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion, we adjourn.
Motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned.